Today, we're going to talk about the person who's always right, the one who turns everything into their fault or into yours, who needs to make you feel small to make them feel big, whose mind works like a predator, ready to attack its prey. This isn't just about an inflated ego. It's about a brain that learned to survive by manipulating, the narcissistic brain. Have you ever wondered, why does a narcissist need to control others? What's going on in their brain when you criticize or confront them? Can you reason with these brains? Can they change? If you want answers to these and other questions about the narcissistic brain from the lens of neuroscience, stay until the end of this video because you'll finally understand why it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to stop falling into their game. Welcome, neurocurious minds. Let's begin. What is narcissism? Before we judge, let's understand. Narcissism isn't just someone who takes lots of selfies or brags about everything they own. That's just the surface. Deep narcissism is an armor, a defense that protects a fragile mind, with self-esteem as inflated on the outside as it is empty on the inside. Psychology calls it narcissistic personality disorder. But there are also more common narcissistic traits that, even if they don't qualify as a disorder, can deeply harm those around them. The most complex part is, they don't see themselves as the problem. In fact, they're not even aware of their behaviors. In their world, everything revolves around their value, their truth, their story. And anything that threatens that is seen as an offense, a betrayal, or an attack. But where does all this come from? The answer lies in their brain, and it's more unsettling than it seems. How does the narcissistic brain work? The brain of someone with narcissistic traits isn't broken, but it is programmed in a very specific way. For years, neuroscience has identified brain patterns that explain why narcissists react the way they do, and the key lies in three main areas: the amygdala, the medial prefrontal cortex, and the reward system. The amygdala, the detector of emotional threats. The amygdala acts like the brain's alarm system. In narcissists, this region is hypersensitive. What might seem to you like constructive criticism to them feels like a personal attack. Their brain goes into defense mode, or worse, counterattack mode. That's why their reaction can seem disproportionate, because they're not processing your words with logic, but through intense emotional alert. Imagine this. You calmly say to that narcissistic person, "Hey, I noticed in the meeting you talked a lot about your achievements but didn't give others a chance to share." To you, it's an honest and even helpful observation, but in their brain, the amygdala lights up as if you were physically attacking them. Within milliseconds, they interpret your comment as a threat to their personal worth. And then, they respond defensively because you're not talking to their logical mind. You're facing their emotionally activated survival system mode, medial prefrontal cortex, the disconnected empathy. This brain region is linked to empathy, self-reflection, and the ability to put oneself in someone else's shoes. In narcissists, this area shows lower activity. It's not that they can't understand how you feel, it's that their brain isn't programmed to stop and care. Not only that, but it prioritizes emotional self-protection over your pain. And it does so automatically, often unconsciously. Imagine you're crying, and your partner with narcissistic traits sees you, but instead of comforting you, says coldly, "Are you going to start the drama again?" It's not that they don't know you're suffering. It's that their brain doesn't pause to connect with your emotion. Their need to protect their image is stronger than their empathy. That's why you're the dramatic one. You're the problem. And because their medial prefrontal cortex is underactive, it's hard for them to step into your shoes because they don't even see the need. Your pain fades into the background. What matters is how they look in the story. 3. The reward system, the addiction to validation. This is where dopamine comes in. Narcissists are neurochemically conditioned to seek external validation, praise, attention, superiority. Each time someone admires them, their brain releases dopamine. And like a drug, this is their addiction. And it's never enough. Imagine a party. There's music, laughter, conversation. But suddenly, the narcissist walks in, and attention starts to shift toward them. Not by accident, but by unconscious strategy. They raise their voice just above others. tell stories about their achievements, their travels, their talents, crack jokes that make them seem brilliant, position themselves at the center of the group with a smile that seems humble, but isn't. And when someone else tries to speak, they subtly interrupt or redirect attention back to themselves. It's as if their brain can't tolerate not being the most seen. Why? Every glance of admiration, every laugh, every compliment activates their reward system. Their brain releases dopamine, and that makes them feel alive, important, superior. But the feeling doesn't last long. So when the attention shifts to someone else, they get restless and seek a new way to return to center. They don't necessarily do it with malice. They do it because their brain is conditioned to constantly need external validation. It's an addiction. And like any addiction, it consumes them more than it fills them. Their brain has learned to survive by protecting their image at all costs. And manipulation is their main tool to do it. But does that mean they do it on purpose? Are they always aware of what they're doing? The answer lies in how and why they manipulate. Why do narcissists manipulate? When you hear manipulation, you probably picture someone cruel, cold, calculated. But in the narcissist's case, manipulation is not always conscious. It's a way of regulating their self-esteem, a mechanism their brain developed to survive emotionally. Very often from childhood, the narcissist learned that controlling others gave them something they couldn't build from within: security, power, importance. And when they feel they're losing that, they go into defense mode. What happens in their brain at that moment? When their ego feels threatened, the amygdala activates instantly the region that detects emotional danger. And because empathy is weakened, their medial prefrontal cortex can't inhibit their impulsive response. At the same time, the limbic system, especially the nucleus accumbens, part of the reward circuit, can trigger manipulation, especially if those behaviors in the past brought emotional rewards, attention, validation, control. Their brain is literally trained to see manipulation as a shortcut to avoid pain and regain power. Common forms of narcissistic manipulation. 1. Gaslighting. They make you doubt your memory, perception, or judgment. That never happened. You're overreacting. You misunderstood. 2nd, projection. They accuse you of what themselves are doing. If the narcissist was dishonest, they'll say you're the liar. If they ignore you, they'll say you're the one who withdrew. 3. Victimhood. They portray themselves as the victim even if they were the one who hurt you. I do everything for you, and this is how you repay me. They don't always do this because they want to destroy you. They do it because deep down they feel insecure, inferior, unstable, and they need to regain control to avoid emotional collapse. Their brain learned that manipulating brings power, and power brings peace, at least for a little while. Can you reason with a narcissist? Have you ever tried speaking calmly? You explain how you feel. You use logic, reason, no blame, and yet it always ends the same way: defensiveness, evasion, or attack. And then you wonder, do they not understand? Do they not want to, or can't they? The harshest truth is this: their brain isn't wired to accept being wrong. When you reason with someone emotionally healthy, their brain activates the prefrontal cortex, allowing for analysis, reflection, and empathy. But in narcissists, that route gets interrupted. Your attempt to reason is perceived as a threat to their ego, which reactivates the amygdala and limbic system. The result? The door to reflection closes, and the door to emotional defense opens. You're not having a conversation. You're triggering a survival mechanism. What if you speak with love? What if you show empathy? Maybe you do, and maybe at that moment they soften, but only until they feel threatened again. Then everything resets, because their brain needs to be right to feel safe. Does that mean they'll never change? Not necessarily. But for change to happen, there must be awareness and willingness. And that is rare in narcissistic personalities, because to admit they need help would be to admit they're not perfect. And for their mind, that's nearly unbearable. So, can a narcissist change? The short answer is yes, but it's highly unlikely. And not because their brain is damaged, but because their entire sense of identity is built on the denial that anything is wrong. What would need to happen for real change? First, awareness. They'd need to genuinely recognize how their behavior affects others. And for that, their medial prefrontal cortex, responsible for empathy and self-awareness, would need to activate consistently, something that's typically underactive in them. Second, emotional will. They'd have to endure the discomfort that change brings without falling back into their automatic defense mechanisms. Third, specialized therapy, because good intentions aren't enough. They'd need to reprogram deep-rooted beliefs, create new neural pathways, and most of all, sustain the process without constant external validation. But do they want to change? In most cases, no. Because as long as their environment tolerates their behavior, their brain will keep receiving its reward: attention, control, admiration, power. And as long as they're getting that, they see no reason to change. That's why, many times, the change doesn't begin with them. It begins with the people who decide to step out of the mental game that feeds them. Now you know, it's not you. It never was. Not only that, but it's not that you weren't loving enough, patient enough, or empathic enough. It's that you were facing a brain that wasn't wired to receive you, only to defend itself. And no matter how much you gave, how much you explained, or how much you tried to reason, that nervous system wasn't listening to you. It was only protecting itself from its own fear. Understanding the narcissistic brain is not about justifying them. It's about freeing yourself from carrying what was never yours. Because when you understand what's behind their manipulation, you stop reacting and start choosing. And when you choose with awareness, you reclaim your power. Thank you for being here, Neurocurious Minds. If this video helped you understand something your curious mind already suspected, subscribe and share this with someone who needs it. Because knowledge is the most powerful tool we have to heal, free, and empower ourselves. See you soon.